Hello and welcome to pmslounge.com. This is Lounge Fever, a series of videos where we try to answer your questions. And the question that we received was not about burn-up chart. Actually, it was about the sprint velocity chart. And from there on, we created videos about sprint velocity chart. We created a video on the burn down chart, how do you plot it, and now let's talk about how to plot a burn up chart. So the entire playlist of all the Lounge Fever videos where we've answered your FAQs on agile topics, that will be the first link in the description. Second and third links are also important. They are playlists for if you're preparing for your PMI-ACP or if you're preparing for your PMP exam. The agile and hybrid part of the exam will be covered with the help of that playlist. So second and third link, important ones. Do check them out. Let's get started. So let's talk about burn-up charts. What exactly are burn-up charts? Burn-ups, they offer a way to keep your progress and the scope separate from each other. If you remember the burn down chart, you would have realized that the progress and the scope was not actually separate, but that's something which a burn-up chart offers. Instead of subtracting the number of points, which is what you do in the burn down chart, you have completed, right? The points that you have completed from the number you committed to. This is precisely what we do when we talk about the burn down chart, right? So you subtract the number of points you have completed from the number that you committed to. That's what burn down chart do. Burn ups, they track a cumulative total throughout the sprint and show the total committed scope on a separate line. So that's the whole difference between a burn down chart and a burn up chart. Finally, the scope is being tracked on a separate line, which is a big difference here when it comes to these two charts, right? It's much easier to track when the scope is changing. If in case there's any change in the scope, which is possible because we are dealing in an agile environment here. So that change in scope can be easily tracked as well when we talk about the burn up chart. All right, so let's take a look at a burn up chart. What you see here are the number of days. You have 10 days, it's a 2 week sprint. And then you have the number of story points or number of points. You've got 45 story points on the green line. The green line basically represents the scope of the sprint. So 45 story points are in scope on day one of the sprint. On day one, you are also able to accomplish 4 story points because the blue line, it represents how many story points the team has completed. So I hope it's clear. Green line, it represents the scope of the sprint and the blue line represents your progress day by day. So let's talk about what happens on day two. On day two, the team completes 2 more story points, and now the progress, they are on 6 story points. The scope is obviously 45 story points. We talked about it. 45 story points is where everything starts. That is in the sprint backlog on day one. On day three, there is actually an increase in scope. And this is possible, right? Sometimes requirements change. Sometimes what happens is there's a repriority of the features while the team is actually working on sprint. So all of that is possible. You are dealing in an agile environment, right? If there's no change here, then it is more of a waterfall environment and not an agile environment. So this is why burn up charts are actually helpful because since the green line, it represents the scope, you can clearly see if that scope has changed. Anyone that sees this graph will be able to figure this out, right? Finally, there's a scope increase on day 6 as well by 1 point. So the total scope is now 48 story points. But then there's a decrease as well on day 8 and a decrease of 2 story points. So maybe a feature was reprioritized. Maybe a feature was not as important and was removed from the backlog. So now you have 46 story points in scope on day 8 for this sprint. Blue line, like I said earlier, it represents your progress on day 3. 6 more story points were complete, so the score was 12. Then it's not necessarily a score, but you get the idea, right? So you've completed 12 story points. The scope of the sprint was 47 story points, and on day 3 you were at 12 story points. Similarly, you can see 3 more story points on day 4 were done, 5 more were done on day 5, and so on and so forth. Finally, on the last day, the day 10, right, you could see that the scope was 46 points, and what the team accomplished was 46 points as well. So the team was able to accomplish whatever story points they had decided as part of this sprint. Looks like a successful sprint, right? So this is the difference between a burn down chart and a burn up chart, uh, especially this green line here, because there's no separate line that tracks the sprint scope as such when it comes to the burn down chart, but burn up chart has this separate line which tracks the scope. So I hope it's clear. I hope you get an idea of how a burn up chart is basically plotted, and it's pretty simple. It keeps things simple. It by just one look, anyone can understand the health of your sprint on any given day. So that was how burnup chart is plotted. So, a quick announcement, we actually have a Facebook Live video every Thursday exclusively on our Facebook group. You can join us at facebook.com/groups/PMC Lounge. This is where I go live and I answer questions and comments from our YouTube videos. So, hopefully, you join us on our Facebook group. I'll catch you guys on the Thursday live. Question for this video before I let you go. Have you used a burn up chart? And do you prefer it over the burn down chart? Let me know in the comments. I know burn up charts are not as common, at least that's what I've seen based on my personal experience. But let me know in the comments. Do you use a burn up chart or a burn down chart? So that's all that we had in this video. I hope you got value out of it and were able to understand what a burn up chart really is. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Also hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we upload new content. If you like our work, consider contributing to us over at pmclounge.com/contribute. Thank you.